Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to Let's Talk Dairy's special series on new entrants. So today we're going to be talking about sourcing the right stock, and we're joined from Carlow by Ashleigh Fennell, who's in her coming to the end of her second year in milk production now, and Evan Kelly from County Westmeath, who's just finished his first year of dairying this year. So Patrick is going to do a presentation in relation to sourcing the right stock after the lads have spoken. So we're going to talk to both Evan and Ashleigh first about their route into milk production, I suppose, about their farming systems and so forth, and most importantly, how they went about getting the stock that they have. So they've done it differently. They both have different types of stock as well. So I suppose, Ashleigh, seeing as you're at the game the longest relative to Evan, we might start with you. So you're in 2 years now, just coming to the end. You said you're going drying off soon enough. So you just explain what you were doing for your farming system originally, why you chose to get into dairying, and what direction you took in relation to sourcing the stock. So,
yeah, it's a poor lookout when I'm considered to be an expert in the field, and I don't know. I'm still very much learning what's going on here. But yeah, just finishing up in year two. It's a big move. We were beef and sheep here for forever and ever and ever, and like everyone, the sums weren't adding up. I didn't really see a future in what I was doing. I suppose I was getting into more stock numbers, and I couldn't justify, the workload was increasing, and you couldn't justify, even with TAMS grants and everything, investment. The return just wasn't there. So started looking at dairy, and started going to meetings and IGA conferences and different things just to learn and see, what was involved, and I suppose, what could be made out of it, and the life you could get out of it, and decided to make the move then. So then, yeah, like the cow choice, I suppose, was the big thing. Everyone gets tied up on what parlour you're going to have and what shed you're going to build and all the different things, but at the end of the day, the stock is the big one. Like, the stock's what's going to make you money. Any parlour is going to milk cows. It's where you start off, and I suppose you're going in and you're profiting on someone else's hard work, obviously, by buying their stock. And we just decided, look, it's a very dry farm here. Anyone that knows me will know that. And I suppose the beef farmer in me too led me down to the black and white road. But also I wanted a cow that will respond. Like, it's not a matter of if we'll have to buffer feed in the summer. It's a case of when and for how long. So I wanted a cow, as I said, that when I go in with silage or maize or beet or whatever it is, that she'll kick on. So that was the kind of the mentality. And as I suppose the beef farmer thing, definitely, I did the calf to beef myself for 10 years. And like, we used to be you'd be going into yards looking for calves, and what are they out of? Are they out of British regions? And there was various answers given, and we all got codded by the Jersey Cross on a batch from a dealer and so on, and like, you'd be cursing that car for the next 2 years. That's the beef farmer in me. But look, went down the Hopkins Friesian High EBI road. Happy I did, very happy I did. Probably, I went against probably the advice of maybe limiting the number of herds that you'd buy from. I went around kind of just, the guy I was going out with at the time was working for an animal remedy kind of company. He was a salesman, and he knew an awful lot of people around. There were kind of 80 to 100, 120 cow herds. And kind of started talking to people, and that number of cows, maybe people who had 10 and 12 and 15 surplus heifers every year type of thing. So they appealed to me. There were people who had the similar aims as regards to milk solids and ideas, I suppose, and I went into those places and picked up what they had. So I started in year one with 75 heifers. I don't know I forgot to check, because came out of 5 or 6 herds between them. So I think 10 was the minimum I bought off one person, up to whatever 20 or whatever. Like, so there was a bit of gathering up on them, but the key thing to me was they were all under the same vaccine and herd health plan. So at least that you know, they all came in and they were vaccinated or whatever. I bought 55 maidens and I bulled them myself, and the rest were bought in calf heifers then in the back end of 2018.
Okay, and in terms of the vaccinations, we'll say, did you suss that out when you were getting to buy the stock first?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That was kind of one of the first questions. You know, what are you vaccinating for? What problems do you have? And like stuff like mortality is a massive problem in herds, and you know the prevalence of that. And I suppose, look, you have to. You know, you like what you like at the end of the day. Like, you know, people will tell you and advise you and, you know, push you down certain roads. But I mean, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder too. And you're going to be looking at them every day. So you have to buy something that you're happy with and you're going to be looking at every day and you're going to be happy looking at every day. So that's a lot of it. But yeah, all on the same vaccination plan, I think, is key if you're going in and to different herds rather than buying all from the one source. But it didn't. So maybe I don't know, but there was never an issue. That the stock mixed very well. They're a great match, and anyone who has come and has seen the herd of cows has kind of just assumed they came from the one place. So that, like, they just match in well, and there was never an issue that way. So like I wouldn't be afraid. I wouldn't be afraid of going into a few different herds to buy stock if they're the right stock, if the figures are good. You know, co-op reports, EBI reports, you know, and you have a good feeling about the place and the farmer. I'd have no problem in buying off multiple sources.
Okay. Would one of the aspects, I suppose, that maybe helped your situation would be bringing them in as bulling heifers too, though, wouldn't it?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah. I mean, like they had a year under their belt or whatever. I can't honestly remember. I think it was 55. I don't know what was empty in year one. I can't honestly remember. It was a handful. So I think it was 2025 came in as in calf heifers. It was purely just because I was phasing out the beef. It wasn't really a conscious thing, but there was a lot of building going on at the time, and I was busy, and I didn't want to have to AI everything between the building work and then obviously the sheep and the beef are still there. But I was starting to phase out the beef herd at that stage, so there was room for a certain amount of maidens at the time. That was more the reason. But I suppose I did want to try the AI process too in year one, you know, to get a handle of. I didn't want to be facing into year two with a herd of cows they were milking, and the spring that had gone before, and be trying to pick up heat and all that. So I wanted to experience that too. So I was just trying to get a bit of everything. It wasn't really a conscious thing that I went out and said, right, you know, I want a certain amount of maidens and then a certain amount of calf heifers. It's just sort of the way it happened. But then of course 18 was a tricky year with drought and everything too. So
yeah, and was it like you said there at the start about focusing on the stock, we'll say, and as you said very correctly, I suppose a lot of people get sucked in by the whole planning permission and getting the bank sorted and getting all the bits and pieces to fall into place, and invariably it's coming to a head like just at the time when you need to be getting the stock, or if you're going to go the in-calf heifer route or whatever, and people get a bit distracted. How did you maintain your focus in terms of making sure that you did get the right stock? Like, or what were the things where did you get the information that you really had to go after these stock? Because there's a good few people out there are getting into cows, but they're just getting into dairy cows basically. They don't know their colour or their breed or anything behind them really, like.
Yeah, and this year, the danger this year is price, to be honest. I mean, thinking back again, I think I didn't buy on price. I mean, we all have a budget, of course we have, but I didn't buy on price per se. I think, you know, $12.50, I think at the time, bought me in calf heifers that I was genuinely happy with. You'd struggle to buy one now for that money, like, you know, because I suppose just with the milk price and the boom, and dairy is booming at the minute, and like everyone is very enthusiastic and optimistic about it at the moment, and at the minute the in-calf heifer trade is seriously hot. I don't be swayed by price. You know, if milk 10 less, then I'd sooner milk 10 less cows than I intended starting with than compromise on quality, you know, to go within your budget. So because you're going to be paying for that forever. You know, if you start wrong, there's only one way, and it's just 10 or 12 years of hardship to make it back. It's just so important to get off, because they're your foundation of your own herd going forward and what you're going to be breeding out of going forward. You have to start right. I think make inquiries early. You know, that was probably what I did. I went around good and early, made general inquiries. You know, do you think you will have, if I knew there was a good herd of cows somewhere, will you have surplus heifers next year? Do you usually have them? Keep me in mind, this kind of thing. Make those inquiries really, or you couldn't start early enough. There's no point in waiting till you have your shed built, you're ready to go in spring. Oh yeah, I'm going to buy in calf heifers. I'm too busy to buy them now because I'm tied up with all the different things in building and blah, blah, blah. And then go look in September of the spring before and to see what's out there, you know, because you're at the mercy of what's left at that stage because people will have gone before you. So like you need to be focused on the stock and make inquiries, pay a deposit if you have to, if you go into a place and they know they're going to have stock, and then you can forget about it then for 6 months. But you know, you have the stock secured, but it's vital.
Okay, so and in terms of, we'll say, the breeding of the stock that you have now, what are the focus areas for you in terms of improving on the good stock that you did buy in originally?
It's just more the same, I suppose. Like, you know, it's a bit of this whole, you know, picking bulls going forward is there's a lot of talk with genomic bulls, and then the EBI evaluations go yo-yoing up and down. And look at this particular year, used a lot of genomic bulls. Now, I don't know whether that was a mistake or whether it wasn't, but starting out year one with the heifers, obviously, daughter proven all the way. Calving difficulty is your number one. When you're bulling your own heifers, and your calving difficulty is the key. Then last year, daughter proven with low calving difficulty again was the focus last year, because as I said, I didn't want calving difficulties and all of that end of it. But so we went for best we could. This year we went more genomic. The cows will be third lactation for the most part next spring. So we pushed the boat out a little bit and went more genomic as well. Time will tell whether that was a mistake or not on the figures and that. But yeah, just more of the same. Like I don't see at the moment. I'm happy. But like spring, the coming spring will be the first time I'll be calving, say, stock that were born here. You know, so that's be interesting to see, I suppose, where that takes me. But yeah, there'll be not massive changes planned here. More of the same for the moment anyway, and see where that goes.
Okay, and just I suppose in terms of the performance of the herd, actually we never touched on that. So just to get that across to people there, you've excellent performance after just 2 years in production. You're about to dry off there, and you're going to do the 500 kgs with a herd of first and second lactation cows. Yeah,
so there was make 82 cows this year, and 14 of those were heifers. Again, those 14 heifers were bought from a herd that I had bought from in year one. So, you know, I said I was happy and I went back. That was no problem. But they were fed, they ate a lot of meal. I said the drought started this year, of course, in May again. So we were in the middle of breeding season. So they were fed for 6.5 weeks straight here. They'll have eaten 1,050 kilos, so just over a ton of meal they'll have eaten here. There's never going to be another way. I don't see another way here. Like, if they could get more grass and less nuts, happy days. But you play the hand you're dealt, and that is always going to be, drought is always going to be an issue here. I don't see a year probably that I'm going to come in under a ton. I mean, I'll try, but you know, the most important thing is the cow is well fed, and if she's fed, she'll milk well. They will just over the 500 kilos of milk this year. I mean, I'm delighted with that. I've no problem. I mean, it's depressing enough having to spend your summers going around buffer feeding cows, but when they're performing like they have done and they're going back in calf, it definitely puts a pep in your step and makes things easier. So yeah, no, I'm delighted so far.
Very good. So we'll switch over there to Evan, so just to get his take on it. So Evan, you went a slightly different route, and I suppose a different angle in terms of getting the stock as well. So Ashleigh went to multiple sources. However, you have just got your stock from one source.
Yeah, I suppose just to give you a quick kind of summary of where we came from in 2000, and it was about halfway through 2018. I had one foot out the door here. I was actually heading off to work elsewhere. Now I was going back to college to study a business course, and I was kind of had it in my head now I'd need, in order to be able to kind of farm here as well a bit on the side, I'd have to have another income. So I was heading on to do something else, and then kind of towards the end of 2018, we decided, well, I kind of put the notion forward about the whole dairy end of things to my father here, and coming from beef, sheep, and with a bit of tillage as well, it was kind of alien to him, no more than me now as well. So luckily we got in contact with Patrick Gowing, who actually did our business plan, and luckily now he put me in contact with a man, Robert English, up in outside Ballymahon there, and I went working with him at the start of 2019, so last year. Now look, initially we were planning on starting in 2021, but I don't know whether I have him to thank now or not. I wasn't thanking him back earlier in the year, but anyway, Robert was pushing me big time to start for 2020 for this year. Now look, we had nothing formed, we had nothing arranged at all for that, but look, we kind of put the head down and said, look, we might get this to work. So in fairness to Robert, it was probably the best thing I did go working with him, because I knew, to be honest, I didn't really know how to calve a cow, never mind anything else, so it was complete alien to me. So as a result of that, Robert actually brought me along to all his discussion group meetings, so I got to know a good pool of farmers kind of, and to be, I'd say, one of the better discussion groups now around, and good high performing farmers. So I got to know a lot of them, and through that I actually got to know the Hickeys, and that's where I bought my heifers. So look, it was kind of the middle of last year, June or July, I got in contact with them and went and looked at heifers. But look at, like Ashleigh said, we're coming from beef. My father's here used to looking at continental beef cattle, and the thought of looking at dairy stock was bad enough without me looking at the Jersey end of things. He said, whatever we do now, we can go down the dairy route, but they're going to have to be good beefy black and whites, and that's it. Now look, we pondered over that. I went, one day we were going crossbreds, other day we weren't, and it drove us both mad now, to be honest. When we didn't fall out over that, we never will. So we eventually, anyway, to cut a long story short, we went with the crossbred. Like I said, we bought 120 off of the one farm. We looked initially, we got a catalogue, we had 157, I think, 154 to choose from, and we wanted 120. So they basically said, look, if you're not happy with what you have there, you can go again, and we have a few more. So we had a good selection to choose from. One of the biggest thing, I suppose, we did look at EBI. Definitely, I went through the catalogue and chose on EBI what I was happy with and what I wasn't happy with. Now look, I was no expert and still not, but I was only choosing, kind of had fertility and milk, and even the maintenance figure there. I kind of knew that the higher the maintenance figure, that the smaller the cow, and we had decided we wanted kind of a more medium-sized cow. So we then went down when he was scanning, and we got to see each individual heifer then as they were scanning them, and he basically, and it was probably the best thing he told us now, he said, look, you can obviously choose by EBI, but he said he'd be choosing the earlier calving ones as possible. So we ended up choosing 120, and 98 of them were calving in February and the remainder in March. So we ended up having 97% calved in 6 weeks. So look, that was huge, I think, because they were calved good and early. It gave them a break before breeding started again. They had all of April there at least, and they were able to get a cycle in and get themselves kind of settled in, and that seen as a big shock, first year. So that's the route we went. I suppose we were under a lot of pressure, just because we were trying to get going for this year. We hadn't got planning permission, anything. It was all very rushed. I remember standing here on the 8th of November last year, and I had no shed ready to put my cows into. They were outside eating every blade of grass we had. We had no parlour even started. We hadn't started building the parlour yet. So we were I didn't think it was going to be possible now, but we just about got in on time. So one thing I would say is you want to try plan these things ahead and not put yourself under too much pressure, but look, it is possible at the same time.
It's not Robert's fault, though, is it?
It is all Robert's fault, yeah. I'm blaming him entirely now. I have to blame someone anyway. So yeah, we were just after drying off there last week. We're about 10 days dried off, and we wanted to give them about 12 weeks dry just this year for the first year, give them a break. We had a slow start to the year, I suppose. Like I said, we'd ate every blade of grass the previous back end, so we were short for grass this spring, so I ended up leaving them in longer than I'd like, and the quality of silage wasn't it was second cut silage. It wasn't wonderful either, so look, performance wasn't going that well at the start, but we picked up now and we finished off at 358 kilos of solids, and we fed just the same as Ashleigh, just over the ton. Now I'd like to get that down, obviously, but look, we were affected with the drought here too, and I suppose we fed a good bit early on too. So, and as well, being heifers, I didn't want to be shy with the meal. I want to look after them. Like, people have this perception, I think, when they go down the crossbred route, that, oh, you don't have to feed them, that they live on fresh air, but we're wanting to kind of still feed them that good bit, like look after them that way, because we did see it in response in how they were milking, and solids went very well like that. So and I suppose as well, breeding went exceptionally well. Now look, I'm not boasting, it could all go belly up next year now on me, I don't know, but the first year went very well. We actually got them all in calf, all 120. One didn't calve this spring. She had a mummified calf, so we milked 119, but she went back in calf this year. So we haven't decided to replace. We didn't buy in any more for next year. Say we're just going to stick with the same number. So
you had set out your stall, Evan, that you were going to replace whatever you lost, basically, but you haven't lost anything. So that's a saving in itself, I suppose, isn't it? So
it is, yeah. It's a saving in itself. And look, we actually decided, instead of, we could have went still, we were kind of budgeting still to replace whatever 8 or 10 or whatever we were going to replace, but we're going to put that money towards possibly reseeding. Reseeding is a big one. Now we've plenty of roadways to do. We've at least 1.5 kilometres or maybe 2 kilometres of roadways to do yet, and so like there's a lot of money has to be spent on infrastructure and that kind of things. So just for the first year now, we're going to stick with the same numbers and see what next year brings.
Very good. And in terms of the vaccination side of things, obviously when they were coming from the one herd, you knew that they were doing whatever they were doing, but have you augmented it in terms of vaccinations on top of what hickeys were doing maybe? Or
yeah, well, look, at the hickeys is one thing we didn't delve into too much. We were kind of happy all coming from the one herd. We had seen 2 of their herds, and they were going very well and didn't have any problems in that. Now he actually claimed he wasn't vaccinating for a whole lot, is what he said. Now we didn't really fully get any further on that, but we definitely what we vaccinated for, we did them for salmonella. We couldn't do any, you can't do salmonella with any other vaccine within 2 weeks. So when we got them first, we did the salmonella, and they got 2 salmonella in case they weren't done before. And we also did them for lepto and IBR, and they got a fluke and worm dose. So I suppose the salmonella and IBR was done first, and then we did them for lepto, I think it was earlier this year. So that's as for the vaccination and the things, like, I think we're just going to stick with the salmonella and IBR. It's very hard and lepto. It's very hard to know until you have a problem what the problem. But look, he was getting no issues with his herd beforehand, but we just kind of wanted to. Our vet that we deal with in Moss Veterinary, he said he kind of set out the vaccination program and said, look, this is what he thought we should go with. So I didn't know that much with that end of things myself, so just kind of taking his word for it.
Yeah, well, sure, you got the advice is the most important thing, that you didn't go it alone. It's no different to sourcing the stock as well. And in terms of the heifer calves coming on, you had a great strike rate in terms of 54 heifer calves out of 120 heifers. This is fantastic. So that set you up quite well. Yeah,
no, it was brilliant. Yeah, we're very happy with that now, and they're doing very well. And I think they've met their targets as they're going along weight-wise anyway. So we're happy out. So look, we'll have them coming through for 2022, and that'll be a big injection into the system then. So I suppose on the strength of that too, we were kind of had that in the back of our mind. We're sort of at our limit here capacity wise, we've no cubicles at the moment. So basically we have 120 heifers on peat, and it's just one big open shed, and when they calve they go onto straw and milk off that and try to get them out as quick as possible. So look, it's not ideal, but it is working. We've got the first year out of the way, and it's going well that way. But look, when the 54 or however amount of them we get through in 2022 in calf and all, we'll be stuck for space. So obviously there's going to be something have to be done down the line. We do have plans for a cubicle shed, but the spondulics aren't there at the moment, so we'll have to get back going.
Sticking to the peat, so
we'll sticking to the peat, yeah, and a lot of squeegeeing sort of things. So but look, you do what you have to do to get where you want to go, is what Robert English kept telling me. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to be perfect in year one, but or year two or year three even, but at least we're going in the right direction anyway.
You'll appreciate it all, Evan, in years to come. That's it.
Well.
Well, sure, you're just echoing what Peter Ham said last week as well, in terms of you do the things that you have to do, but you do it because you know that you have the plan, and you know that obviously you'd love to have a lovely fancy cubicle house, but you can't justify it right now. But you're going to you've got the right things in place in terms of the stock. So it's there's no fault in any of what you said there. So Patrick, do you want to pick up on any points there that either of the lads have made?
Thanks, Stuart. Look, I think in fairness to both of them, to me it sounds simple, but they put a lot of work. I know from talking to both of them, they put a lot of work in getting the right type of stock. And again, no different than Peter Ham last week. There's obviously serious level of management on both the people to get the performance they're getting. I think, and it just the reason why we asked Evan and Ashleigh to do it is, well, like, one is black and white and one is crossbred. But the team is the same, like, is they want figures, proven genetics coming from good herds. I think sometimes, and I know I talked to Ashleigh last week, you get lost in this, is it crossbred, is it black and white, is this? It can be, it's like saying every New Zealander is good at hurling, or rugby, sorry, probably not the rugby. You know, just because you're black and white doesn't mean there's a lot of bad black and white out there, and just because it's crossbred doesn't mean it's good. It has to have the figures. Look, and the one, if you look at both Evans and Ashleigh's there, they're very close in genetic merit. Ashleigh's is 158, Evans is 157. And I think they're, and what they're doing, like, you know, the key is there for any new entrant is because they're getting animals with high fertility, come from good herds, that they're not losing a lot of stock at the start. It's very important. And if we go back to last week where Peter was saying it's tight at the start from a cash point of view, even what Evan is saying there, like, with there's still work to do on the farm. The fact that you're holding on to stock, not losing them, and bringing on and having a good chunk of replacements coming off your initial investment is very important from a business plan point of view. So
I suppose, Patrick, just to emphasise it, like, just given what Ashleigh was saying there about, and she's right, the market is warmer now than it was maybe a couple of years ago. But if you just take her 12.50 price on the heifers, if Evan had to turn around and replace 20% this year, it's going to cost him 30,000. Like,
yeah. Yeah, huge cost, and usually, yeah, and Ashleigh made the point too, and he would have done it too, Evan, that he sold the beef stock and the sheep herd, whatever, or sheep flock, sorry, on the farm to finance it. So usually you've thrown everything at this to convert, so there's not a whole lot of stuff in the background to go back again to buy a good chunk of stock, like, so it's critically important to the plan to push it on, like, on thing. So I'll move into the presentation, Stuart, if that's okay, and look, we'll go through it, and we'll see.
Just before you do start there, Patrick, I'll just remind people that they can put in questions on the Q&A there if they want to put them to either Evan or Ashleigh in terms of what they've done. And obviously, as Patrick goes through his presentation as well, you're welcome to put in questions there in relation to that too. Just to remind you that that's there.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, so first one, and look, some of this might be fairly simple for a lot of people, but milk solids, and I suppose for a lot of people, and I'll throw the question at Ashleigh and Evan there as well, like, that before you started, you know what a kilo of milk solid was? Like, you know, sometimes, because a lot of farmers still talk about litres. I won't ask you, do you know now? I presume you do. You know, like, and when we start talking about, I suppose what we want to do with through the presentation is sort of a lot of the high figures and a lot of jargon that goes with it is to break it down to understand why we breed a certain way. And obviously milk solids is critically important going forward, because in the end of the day, for all our farmers, that's what we're selling. We're selling milk solids, fat and protein to the co-op. So how do you calculate it? So a cow doing 25 litres at 3.5% protein and 4% fat. So if I was to ask the question, how many kilos of milk solids is she doing? So normally, and just like this is a presentation that was done with the banks, up and down. And again, a lot of people understand that what is, but when it comes down to being pushed on it, they mightn't understand exactly what's going on. And it's relatively straightforward, right? I think it is. So I'll go through this slowly. So what you have to do first is to convert the litres to kilos of milk kilos. And a litre of milk weighs slightly heavier than a litre of water. So you multiply the 25 litres by 1.03, that's the conversion factor. So that gives you 25.75 kilos of milk. So that's the weight of milk that the cow has produced in the day. Obviously, all that milk is not milk solids. It's a good proportion of it's water. So we need to next then find out how much of that weight is basically milk solids. So you add your fat and protein together, which will come to 7.5% in this example. So what you have then is you have the weight of milk and the proportion of that milk that is milk solids. So you simply multiply the weight by the milk solid percentage, and that'll give you how many kilos of milk solids you're doing. And that's critically important when we look from a breeding point of view, and we'll go into it when we go into the pricing structure. And that metric of how you do it is the exact same, whether you do it like, so how many kilos you produce in a day, how many kilos of milk solids a herd produces, it's the same formula. So if you said I have a 6,000 litre cow and she's doing 8% solids, you do the exact same thing, you multiply it by the 1.03 to get the weight, and then you multiply the weight by the proportion of it that is milk solids. So am I explaining myself all right there, Stuart, as you're having your biscuit?
Yeah.
On it.
494 kilos of milk solids is what you said there for that 6,000 litre cow with 8% solids, just in case you didn't think I was listening to you.
Man, Stuart, I have to keep you on your toes. On it. And so a lot of people, when we're looking at it, then it's, you know, everyone says a high litre cow and a low litre cow. What we're after is kilos of milk solids, and that'll come back as we go through the breeding. So it's understand milk solids, and look, these presentations will be put out online or recorded and put out online afterwards. You can look at. Just even sit down yourself to write it down and go through it, because once you start to understand where these figures come from, the breeding and the EBI makes more sense to you. So there's a challenge here, and I have 3 on the line. Which brings in more money? We have 2 options. One is you have a 500 kilo milk solid cow. So we have 2 cows. One has a high volume, low milk solid percentage. The other has low volume, but has a high milk solid percentage. So one is, if you like, the typical black and white. She's higher volume and she's low milk solid percentage. The other is a lower volume, maybe crossbred, but has high milk solid percentage. They're both 500 kilo cows. Which of them is bringing the biggest amount of turnover in? Evan. A or B?
B.
B. So you're going with your own, Ashleigh? You want to pick with what you? Yeah. Stuart? You're on silent there, Stuart.
Sorry. I wasn't actually listening there.
So the question is there, so this is where we get lost up and stuff, is a high volume, low volume. The key here is both of them are 500 kilo milk solids cows. So they both deliver 500 kilos. So they both send the same amount of milk to the co-op. One does it through with slightly more water with lower milk solid percentage. So she'll have more litres at a slightly lower milk price. The other one will have less litres with a slightly higher milk price. They both deliver the same amount of milk. So what we're looking at is the kilos of milk solids, and we need to move away from the litres, because that's what we're sending to the co-op. And the question really comes to then is, which is the cheapest to provide that 500 kilos of milk solids? So if you had a very, very maybe Holstein Friesian, very milky type cow, maybe she needs more meal to deliver that. That comes into the question of cost and how you deliver the 500 kilos. But always equate what you're delivering. And Stuart asked both Ashleigh and Evan what kilos of milk solids delivered. He didn't ask the volume. That's what we're sending to the co-op. And the reason for that is important is we go into the A plus B minus C. So all co-ops are paying on solids. So how does it work? So A is your protein. So what they'll do is get your protein percentage and multiply it by the value of protein. So from the markets and looking forward, the co-ops will let to know based on their product mix that they will say protein's worth, say, €6 a kilo to them. They'll also know the value of their fat as well, and they'll multiply that out. So they'll take the proportion of fat in your milk, the proportion of protein, multiply it by the value it's worth to them, and that will start calculating your milk price. At the very end, then they'll take the volume adjustment. So there's a cost to them for picking your milk and processing it. And the biggest thing to remember about most of the milk that goes into in the country, bar the liquid milk, it's dried. So once your milk gets into a factory, they take put into big dryers and take the water out of it. So, and what they have at the end is the solid proportion, or the fat and protein, which they can then turn into different products. So if you can think about it, if you have a product that has a lot of water, you have to send out a lorry, pick it up, bring it back to the factory, dry it for less product. So therefore it's worth less to them, so they pay a lower price. If you have milk that's worth higher amount, has higher fat and protein, so there's less water in it, it's the same cost to go out to pick it up, but when you get back to the factory, there's less water to burn off and there's more product at the end, so therefore they can pay more for it. And that's when we look at the EBI, when we're talking about when we're breeding for solids, is we're breeding for fat and protein, because that's what the co-op use to sell on in their product mix. Okay, and I suppose the one thing for everyone there is everything is a combination. I suppose sometimes when people are looking at breeding, they'd say, well, you know, you're after low volume cows and, you know, milking them. There's no one at any point. We all want the cows to deliver. We want to deliver good kilos of milk solids from a grass-based system. So that's just an overview of the EBI, or the AB plus B minus C. And again, look, if there's any questions at the end. What I find with the pricing structure, the A plus B minus C, is it's one of them things that just, again, you nearly have to sit down and write it out. When the penny drops, the penny drops on it. You nearly just want to take a pen and paper out and write it out on it. Would you, Evan or Ashleigh, do you understand how it works now, or would you have struggled with that at the start? Or?
Yeah, well, like that at the start, I didn't know the first thing about it, so I kind of had to learn all that. But it is quite simple when you get your head around it, and it's explained kind of slowly to you, and you do get a grasp on it now fairly quick.
Yep. Okay. So we'll move on into EBI. So you can see from both Evan and Ashleigh's presentation there, or the EBI figures, they both have high genetic merit stock, and that's what and again, coming from last week, the team is the same, and you heard Stuart saying it multiple times. I think Ashleigh made a very good point in her own. She said when the market is hot this year, but she'd buy less to get the quality, whereas rather than having a number, I think it was a very valid point to make and a very important thing to say. So just look on EBI, like, where does all these figures come from? And ICBF, obviously, the database catches all the data, and it's worked. And I suppose sometimes you just get an EBI report and it's just there, and you don't realize the amount of the background information that's going into ICBF, and the amount of computers they have, basically the computer power they have down there, that's able to collate all this information, come from the co-ops, the vet labs, abattoirs, herd books, milk recordings, and from all that data, they're able to basically analyze to see what herds are performing better and not, and link it back to the genetics. There's a huge amount of background data going on with all these EBI figures. It's not just pulled out of the air. And the EBI itself is an evolution, like, so the EBI replaced the old RBI. So the RBI was out in up to 2000, and it was all production based. So at that stage, it was about the amount of milk. And if we look back, we're in quota at that point. We're working on an A plus B minus C, so your PED per litre, give or take. And the whole gist of the breeding program then was on volume. It's about getting cows with more milk, but they ignored other elements. So it's like anything, if you pick on one side hard enough, you'll get there, but you may forget other things along the way. What the EBI tries to do is balance that by bringing other sub-indexes, is what they call them, so to balance the type of animal we have looking forward. And sometimes you'll hear about EBI evaluations and changes to the base and changes to this and changes to that. And all they're trying to do with looking forward is they're trying to breed for an animal that's future-proofed. So there was a major fertility problem in the herd in 2000, so they brought fertility into the index. And then as more data start coming along, they start bringing in calving, beef, maintenance, and health, and try to get the animal that is future-proof, that's going to deliver for us going into the future. And they're always investigating and rejigging that as well. So the EBI is made up of a lot of different sub-indexes, but you can see there that the main two are the production, which is in the light blue, and the fertility, which make up in around 70% of it. Now, the EBI, so if you have a cow with a 100 euro EBI, what's that mean? So a 100 euro EBI, that cow will live 100 euro per lactation more than the base cow. So everything is relative to a base. So when you see what's 100 euro, it's 100 euro better than the base. And I'll explain what the base cow is in a minute. And the EBI is trying to predict what will be a profitable cow into the future. They're always looking at what's going on in the future. Our market's changing, even changes in calf value, beef value, is maybe protein is looking more promising going forward. They'll up the value of higher protein cows then moving forward. And as I said already, it's made up of sub-indexes of milk and fertility, and which is mainly 70%. Now, so this is the base cow. And the base cow, you can see there's the old base and the new base. So base cow is the number of cows milk recorded on a certain day. I think the last one is 2000, what is it, Stuart?
2005 was the original.
2005. So they took all heifers that were milk recorded in that year and recorded the results. And every so often they update the base. So they'll take different reference period of stock and update the base. So you can see the new base there is for heifers, first calvers, that have a milk yield of 5,743 litres or kilos. They've combined fat and protein of 224 and 195. They have the genetic potential to deliver 390 fat and 339 protein. And their carbon interval is 400 days. And their survivability is 82.5%. And that's the base cow. When you get your EBI report, all the figures on the EBI report are based off that. So for example, if your cow had a minus 200 kilos of milk, a negative of milk, that means she has the genetic potential to deliver less milk than the base cow. Okay? If she's a positive for milk kilos, that means she has more genetic potential than the base cow to deliver litres of milk. Do remember when you look at the base there that they are all first calvers, and you would have seen it both from Evan's and Ashleigh's figures, or hopefully Evan's going into next year, that a first calver will only give you about 70% of mature yield. So it's based on heifer, so there's a lot of milk in these cows, in the base cow anyway. And again, when we look at it from a fat and protein point of view, when you see figures, if we go back to look at Ashleigh's, there was 0.08, I think, on protein. So that means there's 0.08 more protein percentage genetic potential in the herd above the 3.39. It's not above 0, it's above the base cow. So everything is relative to the base. And you don't really have to look and know what the figures of the base cow are. You just have to know that that's the base that you're being compared against. And obviously, the further above the base you can get, the better the genetic amount of stock you will have.
I suppose, Patrick, just before you go on, just go back there 1 second, just to emphasise what you said there, and I think Ashleigh said it, and maybe Evan said it, Evan definitely said it as well, that the nature, we'll say, where people are used to maybe beef stock and bigger stock, the tendency maybe to go for the black and white, which is the bigger type of animal potentially, and there's always going to be an association with higher milk yield with those. But just to be very clear that EBI figure is actually delivering close on 7,000 litres in mature cows. So that's a lot of milk for a grass-based system. And we have very few people that are achieving that kind of output with their cows, even when they're running excellent systems. So just be under no illusion that you need to add milk into a lot of these cows. Like a zero-base cow is a high production cow in reality. So it's very important that people get that message into their heads, and that the solids is what you're looking to deliver on, and that there is also a negative correlation between high yield and fertility. If we go back to that old RBI system that Patrick has outlined already, if you really chase down yield in terms of water, as Patrick has outlined in his A plus B minus C side of things, you are actually going to penalise your cow. It's going to be harder to keep that cow in the order that you need her to be, and it's harder to get her to deliver off the grass-based system that we would be advocating. And neither Patrick nor I are going to tell you that you can't feed a ton of meal to cows. There's no problem with that, but it's probably getting a bit on the ridiculous side if it's going to be 2 ton of meal to get them to just maintain themselves and get themselves back in calf. So the focus has to be on the EBI, and that zero base for milk is going to deliver more than adequate milk to people. So just to be clear on that before you move on.
Thank you, Stuart. So how does the EBI work? So again, we're going to compare it against the base. It's quite simple. So generally speaking, you should be half your mother and half your father, outside interference. So if you take a cow with an EBI of 100 and you mate it with a bull of an EBI of 200, the heifer will be 150, and that's what's called the parental average. So they basically they add the mother and the father's figures together and divide by 2. And that gives a gist of where the thing is going forward. And when we look at parental average, while there can be a range, and I'll come to that in a second, the first thing I would say is, no matter how good the bull is, if the mother, the cow, is poor, you're going to lose half the gain in the first cross. So what Ashleigh and Evan have done is they went out and sourced very high, good genetic merit cows. So that this side of the equation, right, it's very easy by the bulls. But if you start here with low value cows, you lose half the gain, and so then the heifers won't be as good, and you're slowing down progress. So the first start to any new entrant is to get this is the one thing you have control of. It's very easy then go through Herd Plus, get advice from your advisor or whatever to get the bull selection right, but get the cows right. Because as I said, if this cow was a 0 EBI, then the heifer would be 75 or whatever it is, or 100, sorry. So it'd lose 50 on the gain. So that's parental average. So you always lose half, so half the mother, half the father. And when we look at it, this is what they call a bell curve. And basically, it's the natural distribution, whatever. Anyway, it explains genetic proportions. So generally, when you mate a mother and a father, on average, most of them will fall in this bell part, big part of the bell here. So most of them be alike. So if you take a family of 4 kids, on average, most of them will fall in here. You'll have a few outliers. So if we take from a football point of view, two of them are good squad players. One of them couldn't kick snow off a rope, and one of them will make county. So simple enough, really, like. But they're all from the same parents. So you're always going to get a genetic variation. And this is what the parental average here will sort of try to, it's working off the base here that most people will fall in the norm. There'll always be a range. And the problem when you're doing stock bulls is, with stock bull, when we use parental average, it could be anywhere in that. The stock bull could be here, or it could be over here at the right hand side. Whereas when we're starting to pick from AI, and we're always trying to pick on the higher end, so the freaks in the system, and moving it forward. So some people from an EBI point of view will always say, well, Jesus, that's a high EBI cow, which she's not performing. There's a low EBI cow, which she is performing. When you always pick one out of the equation, there's always one to disprove anything. But on average, they'll always fall in the system. So when you look at that across 100 cows, across 200 cows, across 1,000 cows, across the national average, they're going to fall in within the parameters, and that's about 80% will do what they're meant to do. They'll always get them outliers no matter what you do. When we talk about then, and Ashleigh said with genomics, like, so where does this genomic comes in? So genomics is trying to take a bit away some of that variability. So it's basically testing to see if the DNA is there within the heifers, within the bulls, to make sure that to get more reliability around the data. So you'll hear people talk about reliability. So reliability is basically how close to the average or how right are the figures going to be. The genomics takes it a step further, looks for the DNA and predicts forward to give it a higher level of certainty the figures that are available. So it's just put a bit of, if you want, appliance of science to the situation, and that'll give you genomic proof. So within that, you're looking for high genetic merit cows from parental average. Get the bull, it's genomically tested to see what figures they have, has it the right DNA, and is that DNA then suitable to go forward and breed off. So that's where genomics come in a very simple way on it. And when we're looking at AI selection and looking, the key thing there is breeding is a slow process. So, and I said already, half the gain is lost in parental average. And if you think about heifers, and Ashleigh said it at the very start as well, like, you know, if you don't start well, you're going to be 10, 12 years breeding out of it. And if you're only bringing 20, 25% of your heifers, so if you start with low genetic merit stock, you lose half. Even if you use good bulls, you lose some of that through the first cross across the lower cows with the higher cows. And then you only have 20, 25% heifers. So there's a small level of heifers coming in with not a huge differential because they're not that gaining that much. It'll take years to see a significant gain. So you always have to maximize the gain. And from your point of view, you have to start with the right stock to start. And you have to select hard on the key traits that will give you a more profitable herd. So, and that'll come back to when we're talking about the solids and fertility, and we'll go into that in a bit more example now. So what we're looking at is you need to breed stock that are going to last, and you're going to need to breed stock that are going to make you money. So we take an example of an EBI. Look, the figures are old, but that doesn't make much of an odds. What we're looking at an EBI report is a farm in Westmeath. A here is a summary. That's EBI is 173, so it's a very high EBI herd. And these here, the milk, fertility, calf and beef, maintenance and management of health, are all the sub-indexes. And if you add the 41, the 99, the 28, the -9, the 11 and 2, you'll get 173. So the figure on the very most right-hand side is the EBI. And again, that's compared against the base cow. What you'll see then is the proportion that each sub-index below that is contributing to the EBI. So you can see this is a very high fertility herd, and half our EBI nearly is coming from fertility. On the left-hand side, beside the number of cows, you have the breakdown of the milk sub-index and the fertility sub-index. So the first part is the milk sub-index. You can see here 64 kilos of milk, and again, that's coming back at 64 kilos compared to the base, rather than just 64 kilos. Then it's the fat kilos, protein kilos, and on the right-hand side of that C box, it's 0.12 is the fat percentage, and 0.08 is the protein percentage. So they are again compared against the base. And what this figures here are basically saying it's a high EBI herd in the top 100, good fertility, and it's good on milk constituents. The other thing what you need to look at, in particular if you're buying stock, is their young stock. And you will have noticed earlier on the presentation, I put both Evans and Ashleigh's young stock up. You want to see that this will give you an indication of the breeding direction. So the best bred stock on any farm should be young stock, because they're the youngest animals, so they should have the highest genetic merit. And it's nice to see the trend of where the figures are going. So if we look at this person here and say, well, where is he going with it? Oh, he's breeding. Is he just telling me what I want to hear, or is he actually doing it? So you can see in that year the bulling heifers are higher, and the EBI of the calves, were coming higher again. He tells me that they were breeding for fertility. You can see the fertility figure is higher. He says he's breeding for fat and protein, and you can see the fat and protein figures are rising higher as well. So there's always a bit of a cross-check across that EBI report and say, are they breeding them in the right direction? That'll also give an indication of what's going to come on. If he's on, if you're buying heifers off them or in calf day, you'll know the general breeding direction as well. And when you're looking back, we just look at, like, there's a lot of figures on the EBI report, and the ones we're trying to highlight there are just, you don't have to overly understand the whole EBI, but you have to know where the figures to look for. And I want one thing, and like Evan said it, he would have relied on Robert, and you knew them going around Ashleigh as well, is if you don't understand the figure, find someone that does, that'll give you good independent advice. Like any Teagasc advisor, look at them for you and say, look, yeah, they look to be good figures, they're right. If you don't understand them, don't be afraid to ask, because there's a lot of stuff in it and a lot of figures to try to get your head about. So I said this is a high fertility herd, and this is off his calving report. And you can see the black lines are the current year and the red lines are last year's. So you can see the trend is towards the left. So that means more cows calved in February than they did the year previous. Less cows calved in March. So the cow, he's holding his calving pattern, and the cows are staying within the herd. So, you know, it shows like the fertility is sticking. He's not, if you saw a herd there where there's more cows calving in April or May, that means there may be a slippage, but he's holding his pattern. And this is, so again, while it's one herd, and it's just an example, it just shows that the fertility is working on this man's farm. And then we look at it from his number of lactations, and this is what we all want to get to, and it's a mature herd. And this again is off his dairy calving report. And you'll see he has 40% of his animals in first and second lactation animals, which is fine. And he has 60% in third lactation plus. And that's critically important. And after seeing it in Ashleigh's figures, so the performance increased a lot because she held on to a lot of her first calvers, went to second calvers, and they're going to third calvers. Next year, Evan has all his first calvers are going to second calvers. Well, if you see a herd that doesn't have a whole lot of mature animals, that means they have a high replacement rate, and that means they're not holding on to stock, which will indicate there's some issue in the herd, and potentially the fertility is not working. The animals are falling out of the system. And it's critically important that we hold on to animals and mature the herd to get potential of the herd. And you can see there too, on the bottom one is just his calving interval. And again, the trend is to the left. So they're tightening up, the calving interval is improving. So there are all indications of that the fertility is working on this herd. And if we look at his co-op performance, his milk recording, and I've tried to highlight what's important in this. If we take the 40% here, which is the 37 and the 32 animals in the first and second lactation, and we go down and look at them and how they performed. You can see there, of mature yield, these animals gave 70% of mature yield. The heifers gave 85%, and when they got the third lactation plus, they got the full production. So obviously, from it, that's why, and it comes back to when we talked to Peter last week, and even with the two there today, it takes time to build a herd. It takes time to get the production up. But we need to get as many animals as possible into year 3. And that's why we need the fertility performance to deliver on that. And we just do simple maths in a very simple way of doing this, and it's to do with lifetime production. If you take a herd to averages of 3 lactations, so on average the cows last for 3 lactations, and has a potential to do 6,000 litres. So in her first year she'll do 4,000 litres, so 6,000 litres by 67%. In her second year she'll do 85%, 5,000 litres. And in her third year she'll do 6,000 litres. And on average, that's what they do. Now, when I say an average, that means some will fall out in first year, some will fall out in second year, some will go to third and fourth year, but on average, it's 3 lactations. In their lifetime, they'll do 15,120 litres. Divide that by the 3 lactations, and that's 5,000 on average. Because you're not holding on to the animals. If you take the same girls, but get them to extend their lactations up to 5 lactations per cow, and do the same calculation, in her lifetime, she'll do 27,000 litres, because she's another 2 years at full production, and her average yield per lactation will go to 542 over her lifetime. So the first thing we'd have to say when you look at this, to deliver performance on a herd, to get your herd to deliver milk, it's relevant to how much milk is in them. If they're not lasting in the system, they're not going to perform. There's other knock-on effects to this, and this is where sometimes, if you have a high replacement rate, what do you need in the background? A lot of heifers, and there's a cost to rearing heifers. So the whole system will start to come under pressure. So now you have more young stock on the farm to produce a smaller amount of milk. And this one here, you're producing more milk with less young stock on the farm. The key to success to any farm is to have animals that will last. It's critically important as we look forward from an environmental point of view that we keep these animals to reduce their carbon footprint and things like that. But it's more important from your point of view is that it'll deliver on the business. Cows that drop out that you purchased are gone after a year or 2 will not make you money on a new entrant business plan. And then we look, this is coming from his co-op performance report. And so all these snippets of reports are coming, Ashleigh made the point there at the start too, like, to look at the reports, the co-op performance reports. I'm sure Evan was looking at the ones at the discussion group with the boys as well. If a farmer won't give you these reports, there's probably something wrong. Like, you need to be looking at the figures. If the genuine reason for sale and done deal, it's not usually it might be a genuine reason, but doesn't mean it's a good reason for sale. So you need to back these things. It's a big investment. You need to back it up with figures. And we just take this again, no different than the figures we presented last week with Peter. It's comparing you against your peers in your own co-op. You can see in this performance figure here is massive fats and proteins, and you can see in this herd in particular, it's a highly bred herd. It's in the top 5% for both fat and protein. No one much better than them. You can see it from a milk price in that year. The farmer delivered 39.3 cents a litre. The average of the co-op is 32.9. The difference in price over the base. So if he was the average, he made an extra 350 euro from having a higher price. And in that herd at that time was worth 60,000 a year to him. So it was a huge amount of money delivered. And now the key point there was when we look back at that, he wasn't poor in volume, he has good kilos of milk solids. So he's high kilos of milk solids with good fat and protein. And it's delivering on the farm. And this is the extra bit that you will get to future-proof the farm going forward from a low milk price year. So if you can ensure that you have high fat and protein in your herd.
I suppose, Patrick, again, just before you move on from there, like you've highlighted the 440 kilos of milk solids, that could also be delivered with higher litres per cow there per day, but lower solids. And that would translate into a lower milk price, just going back to what you said at the start. So you might have the same amount of output, but you mightn't have the same level of return that you've in this example here with the 350, because you're getting penalised for the water component.
Yep, exactly, Stuart. And look, and I think as we move forward, like the breeding for that fat and protein and delivering that high price that both Ashleigh and Evan have is critically important. Like, that's where I would call it the free money is. That's where, like, there's to deliver a higher proportion of protein through your milk. It doesn't cost you any extra meal. It'll deliver you a higher price. It insulates you against a low price. So if you're so many centilitre above the base, as the price drops, you have that bit more on it. If you're on the base price, you're closer to the bottom, and it's put more pressure on your cash flow. And like, we had an example there. I think, there it is. Yeah, sorry. And it's kind of a sequence. These are 2 herds in Westmeath. One's on a wet farm, one's on a dry farm. So if we look at the top herd, so he delivered 513 kilos of milk solids that year, very similar to what Ashleigh did. You can see again, he's at the bottom herd there did 264 kilos of milk solids. So both are dairy farmers. Both telling me they're doing a good job. Both believe their breeding sessions are the right ones. But one is severely making a lot more money than the other. And if you were to calculate that out, there's 249 kilos of milk solids difference between the top herd and the bottom herd. And that's worth €996 a cow. So if you take that on a 100 cow herd, the same amount of work calving them, same amount of work milking them, same amount of work trying to get them back in calf, the top herd would bring in close on 100,000 more in turnover than the lower herd. And give or take, and actually they're about the same meal feeding, give or take it's the same cost, so it's just clear profit in the system. The person on the bottom had the dry farm, and the person on the top had the heavy farm. But the person on top is focused solely on genetics and getting the right type of cow for a system he's on, and is delivering on it. So just be wary, like there's a huge amount of stock, and that's why I want to just throw that up. There's a huge amount of stock in the country. Just going on buying and they look nice and with no genetic merit, where are you going to buy? Are you buying like what Ashleigh and Evan did from the top? Or are you buying from someone because they're handy? And that could be your 100 or 150 euro cheaper per heifer that Ashleigh alluded to at the start. You can buy them. They will be cheaper at the start, but will they be cheaper over the next 10, 12 years? The good animals will pay for themselves within 1 year. So just on sourcing the stock, and we sort of touched on this as well, minimum number of herds, match vaccination protocols. Evan did it there as well. They put a primary dose, so that's double shots in. BVD, IBR, Salmonella, Lepto. Obviously, a lot of them are tested for PIs now, so so there should be no problem there. Dose on arrival, and you should quarantine if you can. So if you're buying from 2 or 3 groups, maybe have them separate for a month just to make sure everything's okay as well. Sorry, no, they just got out the line on me. And if you're sourcing the stock, use EBI. Look for co-op performance reports. You look for the EBI. Look for the ICBF catalogue. Look at milk recordings. Buy AI bred stock in calf to AI where possible. And look, I agree with Ashleigh. Like, you have to like the look at them. They have to be well done, regardless of the figures. You could have the best genetic merit stock in the world, but if the farmer didn't feed them and they're underweight, they're not going to perform. They have to look the part, and you do have a budget to work with. But sometimes a lot of people are starting the wrong place. They're buying on the budget, buying the wrong stock, and then no matter what we say, and I've often been told, Stuart, and you probably heard it yourself, that I only buy them for 1 year now and sell them and get another lot in. That never happens. Once they land in the place, they stay there, and that's the end of that on it. And that's just a summary of some vaccination. Looks important just to highlight it out. Like, so when you vaccinate, you're obviously critical. If you're buying as bullers, it's a very important period around pre-breeding, where you will get be looking for BVD and Lepto. IBR will fall in depending on when you get them and when you start, and either go on a 6-month or a yearly basis after that. And Salmonella is done in the back end of the year in September, about when they're in about 6 to 7 months in calf. So they're the main vaccines that you want to put into the system, and obviously dose them on top of that as well. So look, that's the end of the presentation there, Stuart. I hope I did my best not to confuse you, so I probably did. So maybe, I don't know. Any questions? I'll take them. Or any questions for the panel, or any comments there, Evan or Ashleigh, on anything I said there? It'd be handy if you agreed with me. Compliance. That's lovely.
Silence is agreement, Patrick.
Yeah, that's what
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, back to you there, Stuart.
Okay, so I suppose people are obviously very taken with what you said. Stunned them into silence on the Q&A as well. So I suppose just to summarise what you said, Patrick, and what the lads have said as well, and thanks to you both for coming on. I suppose we talk a lot about EBI, and people, there's a lot of myths. I suppose ICBF went about it this year trying to bust some of the myths associated with EBI and so forth, and the, I suppose, untruths that can be spoken about it. So like Patrick said, that bell-shaped curve, like when you deal with science, a lot of things happen around averages. And like, why do they test all these calves in the springtime? It's to try and find those ones that are at the upper end of the bell-shaped curve in order to make them bring the generation forward. We have a question in, Patrick, you'll be delighted. So it's just to emphasize that, like, okay, and as Patrick said, there will be cows within the system won't perform necessarily even though their EBI is good, and there'll be the one that'll have the lower EBI but will still be there after 5 or 6 years. And look, that you're working on a parental average. That's why we talk about genomic testing. There's a big campaign now to try and get more stock genomically tested. It can change figures. In a lot of cases, it won't change figures too much. You'll get them in or around the parental average, but you will get stock to move up and down when you genomically test, because it's just that little bit better than the parental average. But EBI is the foundation stone on what you should be building your dairy herd on for the future. And as Ashleigh said there, and Evan has alluded to it as well, like the basis for the herd that you're going to have into the future is what you're buying the day that you go out to buy for the first time. And it's a huge advantage that you will never realize you have, really, until it's only when you don't have it that you'll realize what you've missed out on when you go to start the herd from scratch and buy in good quality stock. Like Patrick, again, I'll have to ask you, because for some reason this figure doesn't stick in my head. In terms of the performance of the new entrants, in your experience, I think, is it within 2 years they're generally in the top 10% of their co-op?
No, they outperformed the average within 2 years, and it was depending on after that then how quick they're expanding. So what I would see is, again, I do a lot of work with the banks. When we look back post-quote, when the quotas were going, that the banks were wary of new entrants like Evan and Ashleigh and that. But now they're not, because the performance of the people that went before them is phenomenal, like Peter Ham and Robert and that. Like, they're doing the business coming from the stock that they're purchasing. So we'd see by year 2 that they're outperforming the average, and then probably by year 3, 4, they're in that top 10%. Now, Ashleigh's obviously got there by year 2 already, so God knows where she'll go next year. And Evan is on course to do the same thing as well.
Yeah, so, but it's just, I suppose what it highlights is the performance that can be achieved by buying the stock. And there are actually herds, established herds, who have very low EBI and have had very poor performance, where they've actually decided to flip the herd. Now, they're not that common, but they've actually sold off their own stock and bought in these high EBI stock onto the farm, started from scratch, not because of a depopulation or anything, but have actually consciously made the decision that for them to continue dairy farming, they need to get the right stock in place. And they've invested in EBI as a result. So it can't be overstated, basically. There's just a question there, Patrick. Calving difficulty, how important for bull in year 1? This person's after buying high EBI calves this year.
Yeah, so Ashleigh said it herself there. So you have to have a calving record. So the bull can't be a genomic, it can't be a test bull. It has to have a calving survey. So that, because of all the genomic figures that they do, they struggle to, the calving difficulty can vary a lot. So it has to have calves on the ground. So that's the first thing you'd say. So if you see a test bull, doesn't have high reliability figure around the calvings, you can't use it. You would be looking to put in, generally speaking, there's a figure for heifers and cows on when you're picking the bulls anyway, and you're trying to keep it relatively low to avoid what you want in the first year. It's really like what Evan had, is the basic calf, get up, no hassle, not a lot of animals holding cleanings and things like that, and get them back in calf. So definitely non-test bulls, and use the figures with a calving survey.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, obviously, what I would say always there is to take advice from the breeding company that you're dealing with in relation to calving ease, because the highest priority on the breeding company side is that they don't want phone calls in February complaining about calving difficulty, in particular in heifers, but in general. So they won't sell you something that's going to cause you problems for heifers, and definitely. So I suppose to wrap it up, Patrick, the highlight, or the key thing to take away from today is, like Evan said, at this time last year, he had no sheds, no facilities, no milking parlour, but he had the stock. So Ashleigh had put time into the stock ever before she even went in the process of converting over, and to put the emphasis and thought into the sourcing of the stock. I suppose we see emails flying around from time to time, Patrick, about people looking for stock. It can vary from time to time during the year, but if you're if your back is to the wall and you have your facilities built and you want to start milking in 2021 and you haven't stock sourced, you're going to end up with any sort of stock in that parlour in 2021. Whereas the vast majority of the good stock tend to actually move in August and September, because the people that have them available, potentially looking for a new opportunity for themselves, or as a sale, as a source of income for themselves, and they want to move them on at that stage. Generally, the heifers that are maybe hanging on for longer in the year are maybe an afterthought that they're going to be sold, and possibly may not be of the quality that you're looking for, and also may not be able to get the numbers that you're looking for. So like in Evan's case, he was very fortunate to be able to put an entire herd together from one herd. Ashleigh was happy enough that she'd done her research, and I suppose the fact that they came in that bit earlier as well and got a chance to settle down in the herd, that she was able to bring them in from multiple sources as well. But there's a lot of footwork has to be done in the background and I should be clear from last weekend today, in terms of getting things to fall into place, that there is a nice bit of effort has to go in, and it doesn't all just happen on the day. And with the best will in the world, time will pass you by very quickly. So people need to be conscious of it and give an appropriate lead in time, I suppose, into the project as well. I suppose just to highlight, I was just asked the question there. If you Google Let's Talk Dairy, you'll be brought to the Let's Talk Dairy page in Teagasc, and the presentation from last week is available there, and today's presentation will be available there in due course. And we encourage you to look at that. We're taking a skip for next week because we have the National Dairy Conference happening on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. So obviously we normally have 2 days for the conference every year, one north and one south, but this year we're going online, obviously, because of COVID restrictions. So on Tuesday, we're going to be talking to Lawrence Chalou, Elodie Roel, and Owen Fenton from Johnstown Castle in relation to making better use of fertiliser nitrogen, what the research is telling us. And this is going to be critically important for you, those of you that are currently in dairy farming and getting into dairy farming, because there's a lot of fertiliser used in dairy farm systems, and we're looking to try to reduce that. So that'll be an important one for you. And on the second day then, Patrick is going to be involved in the second session in terms of improving sustainability through improving on-farm efficiency. And we're going to be talking to Brendan Horn, John Roach and Brian Rush, dairy farmer in Kildare. So just one final question there, Patrick. In relation to EBI, which is based on the national average, is it the case where the cow's individual EBI figure will drop eventually as the national average is always improving?
So the base cow will change over time. So what they'll do every couple of years is if you think about the base, so the first one was 2005, them animals are dead and gone, so they update the base. So the base will continue to change. That's why the figures jump around the place. The figures will always change a little bit because they're constantly looking at, as I said, they're trying to look forward. So this year they checked all the genomics. They're always back checking, and they reevaluate. So there's a couple of runs during the year on the EBI when all this data that we put in at the start from ICBF comes in, and they rerun it to make sure the figures are going right. But generally, she'll hold her against the base unless the base is fundamentally changed every couple of years,
Okay. And I suppose just to emphasise as well, I suppose in case people weren't clear on it, that there's a third of an emphasis on fertility as well as milk. And in Irish dairy systems where we're looking for fertile cows that go back in calf in that 365-day interval that you pointed out, Patrick, fertility is a key parameter in actually driving milk production as well. So to continue to focus on that. So look, we better wrap it up with that. We're back again in 2 weeks' time. So that's the 27th of November, is it? No, it's one of the early days of December, sorry. And we'll be looking at grazing infrastructure and reseeding plans at that stage. So we look forward to seeing you back again there. And in the meantime, take care and make sure to sign up for the dairy conference for next week. There'll be some good stuff on it there. So we'll talk to you in 2 weeks' time. Take care.